Thought About Games, the podcast where games are looked at historically, fondly, and critically. I'm your host, Sid Menon, and tonight we're going to discuss Vanquish, a shooter developed by Platinum Games and published by Sega for the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3. Joining me tonight are Amy Lynch.
Hello.
And Phoenix.
Hi there.
So, Phoenix, what's your experience with Vanquish?
I believe I got it as a Christmas present around the year that it came out, and I had an absolute blast with it. I had played a few of Platinum Games before, like Bayonetta, and obviously a bit of Devil May Cry before that. But Vanquish was a very different beast for me, but I still enjoyed it heavily, and I had a lot of fun playing through it until I inevitably got stuck on a bit, and then never really got back to it. Whoops.
You did end up.
Yeah, I got through it eventually, but
right.
There was just one part that's like, oh.
Yeah, I mean, we can discuss it when it comes up.
Yeah.
Amy, how about you?
Honestly, I think Vanquish might be one of my favourite third-person shooters. It's definitely one of my favourite sort of third-person cover-based shooters because I feel it does a lot differently from the others. Because my problem with, Gears of War, for example, is you feel so slow, but in Vanquish you feel really quick. You feel like you can go wherever you want and there won't be any really slow downtime.
Yeah. As for me, I played the demo around the time it came out on a friend's 360, which is good because there's no demo for the PS3 version. But yeah, I played it around that time, but I didn't get a chance to touch the game again for a while. I think it was only, last year, finally, when I had time to play it. And I beat it all in one sitting on my first go, on a normal difficulty. And I had an absolute blast. Okay, so, Phoenix, you want to get us started with some history about the game?
Okay. Well, Vanquish was directed by Shinji Mikami, who most people know as the director of the Resident Evil series. You know, that one. The one with all the zombies in it.
Episode 2 was about.
Yeah, funny that.
Which, yes, there is an email about how 6 degrees of separation-tastic this has been. Don't worry.
Yeah, he developed it. Well, he began development in around 2007. And development of it was very, very heavily inspired by a 1970s anime called Kassan. Mikami claimed in an interview that he wanted it to be just like Kassan, but with guns, because he'd already covered a very brawler-centric game with his previous game, God Hand.
Yep.
The main development platform was actually the PS3 this time, because after Bayonetta, well, let's just say that Platinum wasn't really keen on having another incident like that again.
Yeah, speaking of demos, I played a demo of Bayonetta when it was fairly new. On the 360, it looked really good. Really nice, very fluid. Years later, I saw a friend playing it on the PS3, and that frame rate was low. I think people nowadays especially have a sort of issue if something doesn't run at 60. But, 30's fine. Vanquish actually runs at 30 for the most part. And yeah, Bayonetta is 17 to 24, depending. I can see why they were upset with that. That was done third party, so they turned it around for this one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mikami himself says, "After I finished up God Hand, I didn't have a team to work with, so I spent about a year and a half staring out a window. Soon thereafter, I was finally back at work in the studio. Vanquish is my first title after this period of almost running away from being a creator. The design of the game started with my initial desire to make a game like the Japanese animated series Kassan, as well as my desire to challenge myself by making a shooter with an incredible sense of speed and no, quote, slogging through, unquote, sections. And I'd say for the most part he succeeded. As for the no slogging through sections, I don't think he 100% succeeded, but in terms of third-person shooters, it's probably why I prefer this one, is that focus. The game opens up with a optional tutorial segment. You can also just choose it from the main menu. And this is a pretty good, basic mechanics overview, but like everything with Platinum, if you want to learn anything about high-level play, that's not going to happen at all. But you get some exposure to some characters who actually don't have much to say during the main game, especially Professor Candide.
Mm-hmm.
It's alright, and it's good that it's skippable, at least so you can get right into the game if you'd like.
Yeah, I hate when a tutorial is integrated into an actual level, because it just means you have to slog through it every single time.
I mean, if it's done well, then it can be good, but for the most part, it's not done well.
Most of the time, it's just... First time's like, alright, okay, but after that, I know this.
So, yeah, I mean, if you choose to skip the tutorial, or as soon as you complete it, you get to see the opening cinematic. Phoenix, you want to run down what happens there?
Well, it's a very lovely day in LA. The sun is out, there's not a cloud in the sky, and oh god, there's a gigantic satellite laser.
San Francisco.
San Francisco, sorry. For some reason, I just thought LA in my head, even though I could see on the screen it's San Francisco. I don't know. It's one of those days, I tell you. But yes, it's generally a very normal day up until a gigantic satellite laser blasts into the center of the city and basically microwaves the entire population.
Yeah, it's pretty violent.
Yeah, it's surprisingly brutal, especially for the tone that the rest of the game sets.
Yeah.
And, I mean, the music's kind of cheesy, too, so it's like, oh, synth horns, wah, 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 and then you see a guy, like, explode inside a car.
It does shy away from the most graphic bits, but oh my god. It's not what you expect when you look at the cover and you put the game in for the first time.
Yeah.
Anyway, we find out that this was all done by Russia, which has been taken over by a thing called the Order of the Red Star, which is a fantastic name. It's real good. We then cut to the White House, where we discovered that President Winters, aka very blatantly Hillary Clinton, is not going to stand for that, and so she sent out a big fleet of ships to recapture the satellite and hopefully bring the Order of the Red Star to justice before we get full-scale war.
Yep, and then you get a cutscene on the ship of a giant man, the most grizzled war veteran-looking man of all time, Robert Burns, giving a speech about what the mission is. He has a metal arm, and he points out a guy in a different looking suit. You'll have seen him if you played the tutorial or looked at the box. It's Sam Gideon. On this mission, under the pretense of testing the augmented reaction suit that was developed at DARPA, which is who he works for. And then, after the briefing ends, Sam talks to Burns, and he sort of knocks on his mechanical body parts and says they really did a number on you. Maybe we could use you as a test subject at DARPA, which is really dickish.
Yeah.
Sam's like a kind of a huge dick, even for a Platinum Games main character, which they kind of ride that line between being a dick and being likable. That's a weird first impression for your character to make.
Yeah, like, especially early on, Sam is a gigantic dick, but he does get better over time.
Makes sense if you read his backstory and you see that he used to be a football player. So when you think about it, Sam Gideon is basically just a jock.
Makes so much sense now.
Yeah, there are bios for the characters, but
Yeah.
they're on the loading screens. You can't view them anywhere else in game, and you can't stay on the loading screen to read the whole thing.
Yeah, it just instantly boots you out. From what I remember, Sam Gideon used to be a football player, but
Yeah.
he got a really bad injury and he actually can't really walk properly without the Oz suit.
Burns tries to slice at Sam with a huge knife and cuts Sam's cigarette in half. Sam freaks out, and then Burns just says, "You're not allowed to smoke on this ship," which I think is pretty funny considering what happens to the ship next. The defense system from the colony laser starts shooting and blowing holes in the ship, which sucks people out into space before sealing it up. You can use all the movement mechanics here if you want to try them out, but you can just walk through. I mean, it's paced to be about that fast. Once you reach the cargo bay, you get a cutscene of them breaking into the colony.
I really love the design of the colony. Like, it is so cool to me just to see this gigantic cylinder in space. And the interior especially is amazing.
Yeah. Everything about it is just really, really well designed, and if you stop and look around, you would just be amazed by just how much they designed in the background. Like, at the very start, when you've just broken into the colony, if you look in the background, you could actually see a load of marine ships just exploding.
Yeah, they definitely actually modeled a lot in this game instead of just showing it off in the distance, and making it abstract.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I mean, I'll say average level fan of Gundam because I actually haven't seen a lot of the series, but I played a lot of the games. And this definitely felt like that. It was inspired by Gundam. It's a design called an O'Neill cylinder, which was actually an idea proposed by someone in like 1976. Yeah, there'll be like one slit that's a colony and then a window to let the sunlight in. They're interchanged, and every bit that's a colony is, just like regular ground level, but since it's a cylinder, it's above you or below you. It was pretty difficult for them to do because they wanted it to have that appearance where you look up and you see the rest of the colony. But in most games, they have it abstracted so that, like, you're outside or something, right? So you can just look up in the sky, and beyond the sky is space. They don't need to show you anything. But they couldn't really cheat it with this one if they wanted to look like there were buildings up there and be at a reasonable speed for the game. And I mentioned Gundam, but those games, you're in a robot that's bigger than most buildings, so again, they have a reason to scale down the detail.
Mm-hmm.
Gecko, you want to talk about Sam's gun?
Which one?
Well, I mean, the whole system.
Technically, yeah, he only has one gun. I actually really like the way they do the stuff with guns in the game, because Sam technically picks up guns that he finds, but what he has is, I think it's called the Blade system, though I recall that's a really daft acronym that really barely works. Basically, it can flash, scan, and recreate any weapon he can find, and if he picks up duplicates, the weapon he has gets stronger. It also looks amazing, like the animation. It files back into itself and then just comes back out as the other weapon. It's so well done.
Yeah, it animates in real time as you switch.
Yeah, it's just so slick. It's one of my favorite little details about Vanquish, and Vanquish is very good about little details.
Oh yeah, Vanquish is amazing about little details. It's just, there's so much stuff, especially on Sam's suit.
And then you get to the first actual gunfight in the game. Robots everywhere, firing turrets at you, your teammates are all shouting. It's pretty intense. There's a lot of shrapnel and debris flying everywhere. Like, a lot. Everything explodes the most all the time. After you kill all the enemies, which I think there's some that constantly come back, but you'll be behind them at that point. It only ends when the ship you evacuated from crashes into the bay.
Yeah, I feel it sets the tone of Vanquish and what you're going to find in most major gunfights in that game, to be honest. Just everything exploding all the time.
Very much sets a very good expectation for what the rest of the game is going to become, because there is no break, there is no real time to catch your breath in a firefight. You have to be moving constantly, and it very much gives you that impression from the word go.
And I figured we may as well talk about the guns as they come up, and I thought it was best that we start with the three guns you begin the game with. The assault rifle, shotgun, and heavy machine gun. So yeah, the assault rifle is, if there's any gun you're going to keep the whole game, it's this one.
Yeah, it's definitely one you should keep for the whole game, because it's just what you need at any given time. It can just do a lot of things fairly reliably.
Yeah, it can hold a decent amount of ammo, does damage quickly, it's rapid fire, you can aim it precisely. Also the sound it makes when you shoot it is just like that good popcorn firecracker, but like bass and impact to it. It's great. I mean, I kept it the first time, never got rid of it, which is also good because lots of enemies drop it.
You're always loaded up, and it's also fairly easy to actually upgrade it.
Yeah.
And it is really good when you upgrade it. I think the final upgrade for the assault rifle gives it like plus 50% more damage, which is just so good. It turns into an absolute destructive beast.
Then there's the shotgun.
I love the shotgun.
The shotgun's pretty good, but I never really kept it for too long to actually upgrade it very much, but from what I used of it, it's pretty good, and I think I used it more on subsequent playthroughs, because it is very good when you use it in its element.
It's very much a reactionary weapon. I mean, you can also use it pretty aggressively by getting up in enemies' faces with it, with your superior movement speed, and in terms of a good, like, high damage output weapon, it works pretty well. It definitely is something you come to appreciate more as you get more comfortable moving into danger, because when you're far away, there are a lot of guns that work better for that. I didn't actually use the shotgun much on my first playthrough because of that.
I didn't either, yeah.
I pretty much used all 3 of the starting weapons almost exclusively because I just enjoyed the feel of them so much. But I'm weird.
And then there's the heavy machine gun, which is another one that I didn't keep, but I did pick it up on the spot when I needed it. The way I played is I had the assault rifle, one of the DLC weapons, which we can talk about later, then one slot, which I just would constantly switch out based on the situation. The heavy machine gun's really good in a pinch. It's a more destructive, less accurate version of the assault rifle.
I actually did a similar thing, but instead of the DLC weapon, I actually had the heavy machine gun. I kept that for most of the game because it's just nice to switch to when you need something dead really quickly. Like if one of the bigger enemies comes out, it's nice to just pull out and tear them down with, because it does a really appreciable amount of damage.
And that can hold a lot more ammo.
Yeah.
Yeah, it synergizes really nicely with the assault rifle, because if you need something fairly dead, but you don't really have a lot of time, just pull out the heavy machine gun, open fire.
It's gone, yeah.
And you can switch weapons mid-firing, so if you're about to run out of ammo, you can just tap the D-pad to switch to the heavy machine gun and keep firing. There's also, at the landing site, there's an obstacle which you can only get under by using the boost mechanic. And I think they put this here, because there's never an obstacle like this ever again in the game. You have to boost under. But they wanted you to use it, because the boost is the heart of Vanquish.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really do get the feeling that during their QA testing, people weren't using the boost at all, so they put that in just to kind of remind people, yes, this exists, use it.
There is a dodge button, and it's fairly effective for like avoiding melee attacks, but even those require you to sort of react at the last second.
Mm-hmm.
And you can move faster than you do in most shooters with your default movement speed and dodge, but if you want to keep up with the pace of this game, you have to boost.
Definitely.
And you'll want to, because it's awesome. The way the boosters work, they're not like you'd expect in most games where your character would lean forward, like you would in like Mega Man or something, or use it like a jetpack. No, Sam slides legs first on the ground, facing upwards, and he just rocket slides on his butt everywhere.
He can also power slide. It should be mentioned that one of the possible animations for the boost is he power slides.
Yes, they didn't do it a lot, but it looks cool.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff in Vanquish that you don't do a lot, but it looks cool.
Pretty much.
There are a lot of animations that the suit does to make the boost look right, alongside the dashing and everything, and the melee attacks. All the parts animate individually on Sam's suit at any time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's another one of the little details again that they just absolutely love putting in. Because even if you're standing still, you can see parts of the suit moving with you. It's really fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
The suit was very much integral to the design of the game. Mikami, when he was first developing, he really wanted to keep the feeling of speed from Kashan, and that kind of led to the introduction of a boost mechanic, along with the feeling that it just felt like a slog early on in the game without the boost. People were just feeling that the levels were too slow, you were moving too slowly, you needed to be fast, and that's how boosting came along. So they kind of took the original design of Sam's suit and they readjusted the hips, because there were some fairly outlying things which really didn't have much of a purpose without the boost. So they changed them into thrusters and said, okay, he can boost now using his butt. Have fun.
Early on, it was going to have various forms, actually, which, with the amount of transforming parts on a suit, you can easily imagine it, like, docking with something.
Mm-hmm.
Originally, there was going to be a female android who joined you on the field, and she could transform into stuff that would combine with your suit. And also, there was a robot dog, just like Rush from Mega Man, and this thing would also combine with you to give you different forms.
What they really wanted to do was, at certain points you can combine with them and create gigantic weapons to just blow people away, along with more utility stuff as well. And that would have been really cool, but it kind of got dummied out after a while.
Mm-hmm.
Yoshifumi Hattori, who didn't design the suit, that was Makoto Tsuchibayashi, but Hattori's the one who had the ideas for the combinations and such, and said, as the player would hoist her up, their bodies would change shape in various ways, from forming an enormous gun to having the android change into a boomerang and be thrown into the field.
Oh my god.
That just sounds hilarious. I kind of wish they'd kept something.
Yeah, that sounds ridiculous.
Like, the dog itself actually made it almost all the way to the modelling phase, but again, it just got cut for just streamlining reasons, really.
To be fair, like, that would add a whole other dimension to this game. Like, I can see how it was easier to take out, because there's also a dog ally in a later Platinum game, Metal Gear Rising. He's a boss fight, but when you're on the field with him, he scouts ahead. So you don't ever hang around with him or fight alongside him. The idea came from Cashern. That design is actually much more emblematic of its era. It's a 70s anime. It's by, or it's at least owned by Tatsunoko, who also owns Speed Racer. It has a very heroic, classic cartoon look to it. The suit actually bears more similarities to the suit from the live-action movie they made of it, which is, I guess, what you consider a gritty reboot, because it has a lot of violence in it. This suit's like, oh, it's holding his body together, he'll tear himself apart, whereas in the anime it was just like a robot body that the doctor's kid transported his mind into to fight evil robots. Bears more similar to that, though it definitely has a lot more going on. It's much more mechanical than that suit. The enemies you fight, and they're who you'll fight for most of the game, instead of Space Marines, you fight these robots called Gorgi USNs.
Yeah, those guys.
Sorry, I love that name.
I love all the names, they're fantastic.
Well, I like most of the names. I mean, some are kind of plain, but these things are bright red. They make all these sort of weird mechanical whirring noises. They're really versatile. They have different guns. Most of them have assault rifles, some of them have shotguns and the like. And you can break parts off of them as you shoot them. If you break their head off, it still kills them. It's not an instant kill, but it's the fastest way to kill them. But if you break their legs off, they will start beeping and rushing at you to blow themselves up.
That does a lot of damage. I think if you're, like, much lower than full health, that's just instant kill.
Yeah, it will automatically knock you into kind of your desperation mode, where time will slow down and you're given an opportunity to just get the hell out of there. You don't want to make them go kamikaze unless you have a method for dealing with them.
If you boost, you can get away, but it's a matter of maintaining your space. Or you can keep shooting them, but that's more time shooting a close-range enemy you could maybe boost away from instead of the other enemies who are still shooting you.
An interesting thing about the standard Gorgies is I actually heard somewhere that they were originally white.
Yep.
But that clashed with the background horribly. So they made them just bright red so you knew what you were shooting.
Yeah, Mikami was really resistant to that idea at first. He really loved the white and grey designs, but even he had to admit when they changed them to red, it made it a lot easier to actually see and shoot them.
Yeah.
And also, originally, part of the early design with the white Gorgies and everything was that the levels were supposed to be wide open battlefields where you'd boost around and there was crush enemy positions. They changed this because they wanted to focus on visual density and intensity. I think that was the right choice. Though it does feel like something I would like to see. Maybe not like as the main way the game is played, but there isn't really a section where you do this even in the game, which considering all the other ways they try to add variety, it would have been nice to have a big open section. Though, then it would also feel much more sparse than other segments of the game.
Yeah.
And I think part of this whole, like, taking multiple positions thing is there are turrets, which if the enemies use them, they can shoot at you forever. But if you use them, they actually have limited ammo, which is not that common in first-person or third-person shooters.
No, it's really not. Usually they just have unlimited ammo.
And they just overheat.
Like, usually what'll happen is, if you're strapped to the turret, it'll be unlimited ammo, but you might have the option to take it off, and then it will become limited.
Yeah, like in Wolfenstein.
Yeah.
There is something you can do if you are under fire from a turret, like, because instead of just having to boost, or just stick your face out to bullets and take some hits, if you press the boost button when you're behind cover, you will light a cigarette. He'll smoke it first, and then Sam will toss the cigarette out, and that'll distract enemies.
Yeah, it is one of those very strange features that you might never actually figure out while you're playing the game. Or you might discover it like me in your third firefight, and suddenly, oh, I can use this, and it has a tactical advantage. Cool.
Yeah. There's actually 2 achievements for killing enemies distracted by the cigarette. I think the first one is 3, and I specifically remember the second one because it's an absolute bastard to get. It's called Old Lang Syne, which is for killing 10 enemies distracted by 1 cigarette.
Oh god.
It's horrible. I haven't actually got it. There's one particular part where I think you could do it.
When the ship breaks through, you get one of these sequences, which is in a lot of modern games that I don't like, even though I understand why it's in here. In this case, it goes into first person, but you slow down to walking speed, and character talks in your ear. In this case, it's Elena, who was also part of DARPA. She was there at the tutorial. Yeah, she just fills you in on the situation. And she says, your suit's performing at nominal levels, and Sam says, never had a girl say that to me before. What? I mean, yeah, probably not.
Sam is kind of a dork sometimes.
Sam comes from the Shinji Mikami school of just awful fucking one-liners.
No thanks, bro.
Where's everybody going? Bingo?
But those at least, like, I can understand why he said them, even though they were dumb in Resident Evil 4. But this is sort of like, huh? I probably wouldn't have said that.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, Vanquish, I think, doesn't stick for some people because it is Platinum's least clever game. They're all, to some level, just, like, gloriously dumb. But there's something about them, he's like, oh, that's actually kind of smart, that's kind of nice. There are two moments I can think of in this game, one of which is the beginning with there's no smoking allowed on this ship, and this is definitely not the other one.
No.
Beyond this point, though, once you get done with this walking section, which you also can't skip, in Metal Gear Rising at least you can do that.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where the demo actually begins. You go out into a bay. This is a big open area. There's a few sandbagged positions, there's some enemies on an upper level, and this is sort of where you can actually really let loose and try out all your abilities.
I was pretty much playing it like a third-person shooter at that point. I was very much sticking to cover, trying to rush out and shoot things when I could, but occasionally getting ever so slightly incredibly overconfident and paying for it badly.
You can go fast, but there are still limits to what you can and can't do when it comes to rushing ahead.
Mm.
The energy bar is there for a reason, and I learned very quickly to respect it.
Yeah.
If the bar drains, then you have to wait for it to refill, and then you cannot boost, and you cannot use the other mechanic that the meter is used for, which is slowing down time. There's a lot of bullet time mechanics in games, but usually it's just a button, you just toggle it on and off whenever you need to. In this case, you have to initiate it doing specific maneuvers, usually evasive, which encourages you to be more active, because you can't be behind cover and just activate the augmented reaction mode.
Yeah.
You have to either dodge out to the side, or if you're cool, you'll hop over cover and trigger it, and it'll trigger when you're halfway over cover and shoot everyone while you're in midair.
Or if you're super cool, you boost into cover, kick off the cover, and then stop time when you're in the air, which is a thing you can do.
Yeah, I didn't know about that for a long time, and that is kind of one of those higher level techniques that opens up the game. If you hop over cover, that gives you some height, it gives you some advantage. But I mean, if there's enemies on the opposite side of cover, you have to turn to face them. Whereas with this, you will jump off higher into the air, and now you're aiming down at the enemies, you have a much easier shot at their heads, and that's everyone on the opposite side of the cover.
Mm-hmm.
This is probably a good time to also talk about some of the other mechanics. We mentioned upgrading guns. There are two ways to do it. If you pick up a gun that you already have, it refills to its maximum capacity, no matter what. They don't have like random amounts of bullets in them, which is good, it's simple, it's straightforward. If your gun is at max ammo and you pick up another gun, it gets an upgrade or it makes progress towards an upgrade. And the other way to do that is sometimes enemies will drop these floating green cubes, which just upgrade whatever gun you're holding when you pick the cube up. And upgrades are pretty important. They're the only power-up mechanic in the game.
I was actually really expecting, when I went into the game, to be able to upgrade the suit, but no. The suit at the start is as strong as it's ever going to be.
Yeah, it is kind of strange, especially coming from, again, like Bayonetta and other Platinum games, and even Clover, and even going way, way back to the original Devil May Cry. Like, you got power-ups, you could upgrade your body as well as your weapons, but not so much in Vanquish, which kind of makes me wonder if they did that intentionally, or whether it was something that was just cut out during development.
Yeah, I was actually wondering that as well, but on the other hand, I also can't quite think of how you would upgrade it, like, in fiction-wise.
Yeah.
I mean, Resident Evil 5 didn't bother with that justification. Just in between chapters, me, the white male protagonist, is going to sell all the jewels I stole from Africa and upgrade my gun.
Well, I mean, when you put it like that...
Oh no, Capcom, you did it again.
But yeah, there are sort of act and mission breaks in this game, where they probably could have put something in, or just let you, pop the menu open when you feel like it. That would slow the game down, but in a longer game where this kind of mechanic would probably fit better, I don't think it'd be as much of a problem. And you could frame that any number of ways. When you're just blowing apart all these robots, gives you raw material to upgrade your gun that can scan other guns and become other guns. The upgrades have all sorts of effects. In some cases, it increases your ammo capacity. It might increase your fire rate. For the shotgun, I think it increases the amount of pellets it outputs per shot.
One thing I really like about the upgrade system is that it gives you a reason to keep the guns that you have, but also a reason to experiment as well. If you're not liking how your gun's upgrading, if you think it's just not keeping up, then you can just, get another gun, start upgrading it, see how that one goes. And eventually you do kind of start to get a feel for every gun, and you really start to stick around with your favorites because, oh no, what if I drop this gun, and then there's an upgrade later down the line, and I can't upgrade it anymore?
Yeah, that's true. There's still a resource consideration to go with it. One of the problems is the game doesn't communicate that you don't need to pick up the exact same assault rifle that you had all your upgrades on for you to have those upgrades.
Mm-hmm.
If you find another one later, it'll still have the ones you have,
Yeah.
because the upgrades are stored on your gun. They're not stored on the things you drop and pick up.
Which is really nice. What isn't really nice about the upgrade system is every time you die, the current weapon you have equipped loses one of its ranks.
I mean, that's another reason to carry a gun maybe you're not set on upgrading, is if you can feel like you're not going to make it, but you still have some time to react, you can switch to that gun and just bomb out its upgrade.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
One other attack mechanic, which I just wanted to talk about really quickly, which is melee attacks, which vary across the type of gun you have equipped. These are cool, but with a caveat I do not really like, and a lot of people don't, which is using a melee attack, no matter how much, if it's a multi-punch combo and you punch once or you mash the button and do a million punches, it will bottom out your ARS gauge immediately.
Yeah, it's not particularly fantastic. It's justified in the game itself as just Sam literally uses all of his boost to punch this guy really hard in the face, but at the same time...
I can kind of see why they did it, though, because I think the fact that it bottoms out your boost gauge kind of adds impact to it.
Yeah.
But I can also see why people would dislike that, because the melee is cool. You want to do the melee more, the melee attack on the assault rifle, you literally just go star platinum on someone's ass. It's great.
I guess that's the problem too, is you do one punch, it drains all your gauge. You do all the punches, it drains your whole gauge.
Yeah.
So the fact that you can do some makes it feel like it should just drain some of your gauge.
Yeah, but I suppose that would mean every single attack would have to have some kind of number attached to it, which I could see being slightly more awkward.
Yeah, that is fair. Another good thing about melee attacks, though, is they automatically face the nearest enemy.
Yeah.
So the Gorgias actually have bayonets on their weapons, which they'll slash at you with. There's a bit of a wind-up. You can dodge it, but you can't actually just blindly mash the dodge button. You have to wait for the last moment, otherwise they'll turn towards you mid-slash.
Mm-hmm.
So in that case, if there's one left or something, or you're in a position where you can hide without worrying about needing to engage slow motion or boost, you can just tap the button and punch the thing out before it hits you. Yeah, and this section also, enemies zap in, which is then teleporting in. This is kind of neat because it allows for two sort of ways of approaching it, where if you're cautious, you can take the time to set yourself up to be in a good position to take out the enemies. But if you're aggressive, you can do a really cool maneuver where you throw a grenade at them as they're about to teleport in, go into slow motion, and then shoot the grenade, which will cause an even bigger explosion somehow as soon as they appear. Did either of you know about this before having to look it up?
I definitely did not, because I just thought, okay, I'm gonna throw out a grenade and hope that everyone sticks together before it explodes.
I want to say I did know about that because there's a very similar thing in Lost Planet 2. And I think I might have been playing those around the same time, so just instinctively I just threw a grenade and shot it in midair.
Yeah, that makes sense. I only found out about it when I was watching a speedrun by a guy named Half Coordinated. He did it live at an event called... it was either Awesome Games Done Quick or Summer Games Done Quick. Like, it's a speedrun tactic because it does improve your damage output a whole lot. There are 2 types of grenades. These also have upgrades, but since you're always carrying grenades pretty much, as long as you don't throw all of them all the time, you can get upgrades, which mostly just increase your capacity and I think damage sometimes.
Yeah, you can upgrade the grenades, and mostly it's just the capacity and damage, but both of them have a special final upgrade. The second up grenade you get, which is the EMP, which just stuns enemies, that actually, the final upgrade instantly kills Gorgies.
Nice.
Oh, wow.
It is really good. It is definitely worth saving up for, if you can. But it can also be kind of difficult because grenades aren't massively frequent.
Yeah, you have to kind of just not use them ever.
Yeah.
You want to get that. And you can't use upgrade cubes because you're never technically holding the grenades like at the ready.
Mm-hmm.
The hand grenades are straight up damage, so they're good for any situation. But the EMP emitters stun enemies, and that works on pretty much everyone. It's actually probably more efficient on bosses to use an EMP emitter to stun someone and then go into slow motion and without worry unload tons of damage on them.
Yeah, it's a very good strategy to use, because, again, they can't hit you. You can take very good advantage of that.
Also in this segment, you can find a sniper rifle, and it's weird to think of this gun fitting into this game because of the high speed with which you move and stopping and, aiming slowly to snipe someone. But if you use this alongside slow motion, you can actually feasibly use a sniper rifle in close combat for precision shots. And this is a fairly open area, so it's actually pretty useful. And most of the battle areas are either open or long enough that you can make use of the sniper rifle.
My only problem with the sniper rifle is, the sniper rifle doesn't really work with the way the weapon's upgrade system works, because there's not a massive amount of point I ever felt to actually keep the sniper rifle with you. Because if you need a sniper rifle, the game will always just give you one.
That's true. I mean, if you like it though, you can always keep it as an aside. There's definitely one segment where you can get a lot of sniper rifle upgrades.
Yeah.
Though it's not advisable to do it at that point because you want to have them to reload with.
Mm-hmm.
There aren't just Gorgies here. There are also bigger enemies called Romanovs, which have a big cannon and they're much bigger. They can hit harder, but you can get around them easier. And they have a weak point that's on their back. You might not actually have to fight any of them that way in this section because there are these things you can hop on called walkers that have limited ammo again, but they fire these powerful explosive energy shots, and you can steal one from an enemy by just killing the enemy on it, and you can just jump up behind it. There's a point where a bunch of enemies come through a gate, and I always grab the walker and just point it at the gate and blast them all as they come through, and they can't really do anything about it.
Yeah, it's definitely kind of like the game giving you an easy option and saying, here, have some fun.
I actually didn't catch on that you could pilot the walkers until like my third playthrough. Actually, I don't even know if it was my third playthrough. I think I had to watch an LP to figure it out.
Yeah, I think I saw it in a trailer or something, or like a playthrough of someone playing the demo. Because you can also just blow the walker up by shooting it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And with the amount of turrets in the area and things, that's pretty possible. After you clear out the enemies here, you get one cutscene, which, just says to go on ahead through the gate. It's kind of weird that this is here, because there's a cutscene where people just say, okay, move forward, and nothing happens in it. And then you do move forward, and then there's a cutscene where Elena detects that they're zapping in something big, and it is big.
Oh, yes.
The Argus, which the only thing Elena really says about it, it's at the center of the arms control debate, which I think is a really good way to just describe how powerful something is without having to say too much about it. That people, even with all the weapons of war you're currently fighting with, they're like, I don't know about this one.
This one might be too much.
Yeah, it's a really nice bit of world building as well, because it kind of gives you an idea of what the current bleeding edge of technology is, and it's this gigantic robot that you have to kill now. Have fun.
It's harder than it looks, but also, if you don't pay attention, then it can kind of sneak up a lot of damage on you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it has a bunch of mounted guns, which are pretty much constantly firing at you, but also all the other Marines that are with you. It also has a big main cannon, and you want to hit the core on it to lower its health bar. Everything else will just destroy the things that are mounted on it. But when you weaken it enough, when its core is exposed, it will send out these pulses that will actually overheat your suit and disable your augmented reaction gauge.
I don't think those waves can actually hit you if you're behind cover though, which is nice. But yeah, that's a nasty surprise the first time, because I think that's the first thing in the game that can really just stop you from using your time slowing and stuff.
Yeah, you don't need to use boost too much against this boss, except that the turrets, they also can get blown up pretty easily, especially by bosses, less so by you. And the boss will target you if you're laying into it. It can kind of suck if you expose its weak point but you don't have any turrets left and you have to use your own weapons, but they give you a fair amount. You can actually run out of ammo in this game and have no options left for destroying something. Even the manual says just reload a checkpoint and try again. Or, die, but that didn't happen to me ever. I never really felt like I was in danger of completely bottoming out on ammo.
No, they really do everything they can to make sure that you always at least have a weapon available.
And once you get its health low enough, it transforms from a sort of spider robot thing to a person robot thing. Before it transforms, though, it launches just tons of missiles everywhere.
I wonder if that's why it's at the center of the arms control debate. Because when it transforms, it just spews rockets out everywhere. It's got to be against some kind of convention.
Yeah, so this is definitely a case of scarier than it looks, because you can just sort of hide behind cover in one place and none of them will hit you.
Yeah.
It actually takes effort to get hit by them. And in this case, it's the same deal, though you have more weak points that you'll want to break down so you can expose the core. And since it's bipedal now, you have more room to actually face it on the ground floor area, which is much more open. Though, a weird thing with this game, there are finisher moves on the bosses, but they're, one, not necessarily finishers, and two, aren't really triggered especially by your actions. They're more as reactions to what the boss or the enemies do in this game.
Yeah, the first time the QTE for the Argus triggered, I was just going like, what am I doing? Why do I hitting these buttons? And I failed completely. But the next time it happened, I was a bit more ready for it, and the result was amazing. Like, I think it was during the spider tank section still, where he just launches one of his big old missiles. And so, of course, Sam just decides, I'm going to jump on that missile and I'm going to ram it straight down the spider's turret. As you do. If you get it right, it does a ton of damage and it looks really cool, but you have to be prepared for it happening anytime.
I think the main one most people will get is it'll slam its arm down, so the QT is to dodge the arm. He runs up on its arm, dodges around it as like the hand launches him into the air, and fires missiles at him. You rotate the analog stick as Sam sort of like twists his body around where the missiles are, and then for the last one he grabs it and shoves it into the arm, and he also goes in the arm, and then he explodes out of it.
It's a real just precursor to Metal Gear Rising, I feel, because you don't mind that they're QTEs, because holy shit, this is amazing.
Though these ones are honestly kind of hard.
Yeah, they give you some really awkward motions to do.
Yeah, it's kind of a holdover from the Bayonetta days, I feel like, because those QTEs were A, very unforgiving, and B, pretty difficult to pull off.
Once you blow this thing up, you get a ranking screen, which, unlike every other Platinum game, it doesn't give you an overall rating to say, really how good of a job you did. It just tells you things, and you're supposed to discern from that. You get a score, but, you don't know, is this a good number, is this a bad number the first time you play? and you don't really know how all the factors it gives you figure into that score.
Mm-hmm.
How much time in cover is too much time? I don't know. It tells you how much time you spent in cover, like percent of time in cover.
Yeah.
I've always kind of wondered if you can do like a 0% cover usage run of Vanquish.
Maybe.
It would probably be possible, but you'd need to be very good with your boosting. Economical with it.
Mm-hmm.
It also ranks you on something, which is kind of another disappointment, is how many Pangloss statues you collected.
Oh, God.
And these are just figures hanging around in the background, which when you shoot them, say in like a high-pitched, not quite chipmunk, but like a high, like obviously pitched up line that one of the Marines would say. So usually something really sweary. And for shooting them, you get nothing. I haven't actually found most of them, and I really don't care to.
They're really well hidden. It's like you don't get anything for them, which is a real disappointment considering like Bayonetta, Resident Evil 4, which had just so much unlockable stuff.
Even Gears of War has, like, oh, if you shoot all these dumb things, you get a squirt gun or whatever. I can't remember, but yeah, it's so weird then for people who are very good about this to just throw in a collectible that's total nonsense. I don't even actually know if it affects your score.
Yeah.
I mean, I assume it does. For that 0% cover run, too, I imagine if there was any difficulty you'd do it on, it would probably be casual difficulty.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
I played on normal. Below that is casual, and then casual also has an additional mode called casual auto, where when you pull up the weapon sights, you will automatically turn towards an enemy. And also enemies have drastically lowered health in this mode.
Mm-hmm.
So if you use a high power weapon, you just hold the button, tap, and you'll move to the next enemy, tap, and you move to the next enemy. It is easy, but it does also feel kind of cool. Like, I like it for different reasons than challenge.
I think there's 5 difficulties. There's casual, normal, hard, very hard, and god hard.
Yeah. The casual difficulty actually on the Platinum Games blog, which is where we're getting these quotes from. Shinji Mikami said, once you get your target on the enemy, the rest is easy as pie. I'm sure saying it that way makes it sound totally uninteresting, but when you actually give it a shot, the tempo it gives the gameplay will make you jump up and say, woohoo!
Shinji Mikami's a strange man.
I can see
where the nominal suit performance line comes from.
Yeah, like, all of the blog posts are very, very casual, very kind of, oh, we did this because we felt like doing it, and it gives you a good mindset into how Platinum Games thinks as a company.
Yeah, I definitely appreciated that. So when we get to the next section, like the last segment had a boss in it, but the next gunfight has a lot more enemies concentrated into upper and lower areas. There's a chance that when your allies take a lot of damage, they'll actually die, but you have a limited time. You can run up to them and press the action button, and you'll revive them, and they'll drop a random item.
Yeah, that's actually one of the ways that it makes sure that you always have at least some kind of option, because sometimes the soldiers will drop grenades, sometimes they'll drop weapons, but you'll always have something to deal with it, and you won't really ever be in danger of bottoming out unless you have no soldiers near you.
And even if you're doing well, like it can just be kind of useful. Like, oh hey, this guy dropped another assault rifle. Upgrade. Sweet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you always have an incentive for doing it, and I really appreciate it for that.
Yeah, and you can revive people endlessly, there's no limit. One of the many clever bits of dialogue is after that section, Burns is sassing Sam about DARPA not developing teleportation. And Sam says, last time we tried it, we had a rat with its head literally shoved up its own ass.
Yeah, that is just one of my favourite lines in the game. It just comes out of nowhere. It's not really remarked upon at all. It's there and it's done and it's fantastic for it.
I think my favourite line in the game is actually a few chapters later.
There are chapter titles, we're not going to refer to them because I hardly noticed when they popped up in the game.
Mm-hmm, I can't even remember any of them.
Yeah.
Even though it's split onto 2 levels, most of the fighting is below. Once you get on top, there's a door you need to open, but some of the Marines have been captured, and Burns makes a big deal out of just saying, just leave them behind, screw them, like even though you can't even get the door open yet, and this encounter's not actually that tough, but Sam makes a point of doing it. Burns grudgingly allows him to. and these guys are in these weird electric restraint things, which when you save them, they all say something weird to the effect of liking it.
Yeah, like the first guy is kind of like, oh, thank God you got me out of there. But then as you go on, they're like, actually, could you put me back in, please? Or can I get one of those on eBay?
Yeah, one of the guys like, oh, I actually fixed, like, my back. Which, why are you going into this with a bad back, dude? Yeah, it says you can't buy those on eBay, which... I mean, I used eBay recently, but that's not even something I think about today, is using eBay.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, like, that culturally relevant now, but in the future, eBay is going to have a big resurgence. Some of the Marines stay behind to guard the door, which, why? There's not that many of you. Like, at the beginning when all the ships got blown up, it kind of gave the impression that, like, oh, Sam and these Marines are going to be the only guys left, but not actually. These are just the most close by. But still, I don't know why they leave, like, 2 guys behind to guard this door that you're not ever going to go back through. Then the next section has a new enemy introduced, called the Chicane. At first you might not recognize it's an enemy because it is a turret that forms into cover, which the enemies use a fair bit. In these cases you have to get behind them to take them out or wait till their turret form. They're not too active. There's definitely a few times where it cleared out the enemies and like turned around and realized that Chicane was just chilling out, not doing anything. But if they go into turret mode, they can be almost as threatening as an enemy on a bigger turret. And once you get through here, you get yet another segment where Burns just wants to leave people behind, and you and Sam have to rush back to save a dude who's been hit in the leg, and they make a big deal out of it. As soon as you save the dude and the gate shuts behind you, and you open up a path forward, the guy you saved gets shot in the head.
Yeah, it's really more to establish the fact that Burns is kind of a dickhead.
Yeah.
You didn't really need more basis for that, but the game loves to throw it at you. Like, Robert Burns is not a good person.
No. But it's weird too, because in most Western games, the Marine thing is that, like, you don't leave your men behind, you complete the mission and everyone comes home, and it's supposed to garner this communal feeling, though, you know, maybe that's in part because they're trying to get people to join the Marines because they're sponsored in some way or they believe in that thing that they want to sell the people as an image, you know, much more patriotic. But this is a Japanese developed game about Americans, so he's just going to be a huge dick about it instead. So this next segment, I found a few more of the DLC weapons dropped. They're not really weighted in any specific way, but at this point you've probably at least seen them. And that would be the disc launcher, boost machine gun, and the anti-armor pistol.
I don't think the disc launcher is a DLC weapon.
Yeah.
Alright, well, in any case, I sort of put it alongside these specialized weapons. I didn't use the disc launcher much myself.
No,
because
neither.
I found it kind of weird to use, but apparently Phoenix is a huge fan.
I love the disc launcher, but mostly because it reminds me of Destroy All Humans 2, and that had a fantastic disc launcher. But it is still useful in its own right. Like, if you upgrade it enough, it can kind of bounce around enemies, which is kind of useful for clearing out the trash. But it's also a disc launcher. How could you not love that gun?
It's also a melee weapon.
We're saying disc, but it's just a giant circular saw.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I love it. You can run up to people and literally just chainsaw them to death. I love it. It's great.
Yeah, so if you missed the chainsaw bayonet from Gears of War, well, now you have a circular saw gun that shoots the saw at people. It doesn't have a lot of ammo, though, and I am not a great shot, so it wasn't a good fit for me. Speaking of not a lot of ammo, the boost machine gun is it's weird. It's like the heavy machine gun, but the clip is tiny. You go through that thing in no time at all, but each shot does tons of damage.
I tried to use the boost machine gun, but just the low amount of ammo and never really being able to upgrade it because of how scarce it seemed for me, I ended up ditching it.
Yeah. In my last playthrough, which I tried out casual auto mode, I did try to stick with this gun for a while, and it takes a long time for the upgrades for you to get it to have enough ammo where you don't feel like you're running out all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're a little over halfway through the game, one of the upgrades is that it can shoot through walls. which sounds really good. And I wish, you could get that maybe a little earlier to set it apart.
Yeah, because otherwise it's just a slightly harder to use heavy machine gun.
And then there's the anti-armor pistol, which I really, really like. It does a ton of damage per shot. On casual difficulty, it kills Gorgies in one hit. So that's definitely a weapon where it's just hold L. It's like tap, 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 I killed everyone.
Yeah, it's a really good one.
Also hard to find ammo for. Yeah, it has a zoom function. I didn't think it needed something that powerful, but okay. I mean, I'm not opposed.
Yeah.
There's another mechanic I wanted to talk about related to the ARS gauge, which is if you fire while you're boosting, you automatically go into slow motion. I can get why they did it, because it would be hard to aim, but also that drains your gauge really fast, and you can't, like we said, there's no upgrades to the suit. You can't make that last longer at all. It seems kind of limited in its application.
Yeah.
It seems better to move into a position where you can then just run and dodge freely.
I never really fired while boosting that much, so it wasn't really a problem for me, but I could see why it might be a problem that it just does it automatically.
I'd say my problem is that I never had an incentive to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's a shame, because there are cutscenes where you see Sam boosting while shooting something at high speed, and that looks cool. That looks like something I'd want to do, but the added slow motion kind of gets in the way of that. Because it seems more like a desperation maneuver than a precision one.
Yeah.
I kind of like to keep the slow motion and the boosting separate, just because one is for the sensation of speed and one is for precision. And it would be nice to feel like you're going fast while attacking. You really don't get that.
Yeah.
After this sequence, there's a point where you have to get into a tunnel. Sam has some high explosives on the suit also that he just has, which he only uses for walls. You never use it on an enemy, ever. Just kind of a bummer, like not even in a QD.
Yeah.
You place it, and then you just have to get far enough away and set off an explosion. I think you can set it off when you're close enough.
You absolutely can.
It will just kill you.
Yeah, it kills you instantly. Like, Elena will tell you when you're out of the way. So just wait for her to go ahead. But it also does work on enemies, so sequences where there are a lot of enemies and you have to place an explosive, you can do that and just get out and blast them all at once. But when you get into this tunnel, they also call in an APC with a railgun on it, and it just has to move slowly through this tunnel, and the APC can only fire its gun when you reach the end because the tunnel's unstable, so you have to defend it from these enemies called jellyfish. They are full of self-detonating mine robots, and they are also giant self-detonating mine robots.
Yeah. Those enemies are a real pain in the arse, and they never actually come up after that.
Yeah, they're only here.
I think we can all be glad of that, because they are utter bullet sponges. They're difficult to see in the darkness, even with all of their glowing lights on them.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time you actually get to them, chances are you'll have got through 1.5 of them, and then a third one will explode on your APC. And there isn't really much of a way that you can prevent that.
Yeah, it's really annoying.
There's actually a comment on the blogs about the interface. I think it's kind of interesting. It shows up best here because it's so dark that you only really have your interface and a little bit of light to go off of. So Takahiro Fuji, who did the design, said, "There's a downside to the benefit of having such clearly defined outlines around images, and that's getting into a situation where the image starts looking bland. I want to do something to make sure this didn't happen in Vanquish, so I made sure to include elements like dirt and distortion, noise, and an abundance of optical effects to make the interface seem a bit blurred and out of focus. The images aren't totally clean, and in this section you can see your interface sort of scratch and come in and out a bit. Not completely, but it does seem like it's sort of losing reception, which sells the segment a bit better. It's not like a horror segment or something, but it is much more of a tense sequence.
Yeah, it's done quite well, though. I think it's one of my general least favourite chapters.
There's worse in the game, and we'll get to that, but this one is not exactly a high point either.
And then the cannon ends up blowing up a tiny bit of debris, and Burns is really impressed by that. But then you come out the other end, and this next combat arena has not an entirely new enemy, but a variant on the Romanov called the Romanov F for flamethrower.
Yeah, those ones are wild. I think their flamethrower can't actually just overload your suit, overheats it and you can't use your boost.
Yep.
Which is really annoying.
It's tough to get out of that situation then, because you can't get behind them. But that's balanced, because you can also kill them almost instantly. Flamethrowers need explosive fuel packs to work, and if you can get high up enough with like your boost in slow motion, you can shoot the exploding pack and blow them to hell.
Yeah, at least there's that.
Yeah, I never once did that in my first playthrough. It was a lot harder that way, and then they become almost a non-element once you figure that out.
Yeah, I think I managed to do that by basically just taking the long way around them, staying out of the range of their flamethrower, and then just slide boosting around the back, then just using slow motion to shoot the fuel packs that way. And while it wasn't exactly the most graceful thing in the world, it definitely helped.
Also in this segment, enemies come in not by teleporters, but through seismic drill saw transports.
God, yeah, those things.
These things are ridiculous designs.
Yeah, they're amazing.
They honestly remind me out of something out of Broforce, which is very much the same idea, but without the sauce.
They're really silly, and they mostly only contain Gorgies. I think there may be a couple Romanovs. And these look kind of dangerous, but as long as you stay away from them when they actually just like lock on, they don't do much else. Which is weird. It seems like you should be able to attack them, because you can blow up big transport ships that enemies are on before they come in, but not these. You can't do anything about them until they're all set up. And also, it kind of sucks because most enemies you can hit when they're coming out of transports. The enemies aren't like active and shootable until they're activated once the transport comes in. You can shoot them a little bit before they come out, but not too much.
Mm-hmm.
Once you clear this segment, you reach an elevator, and who is in sight but Professor Candide? Because, wow, even with this outline, we skipped something. At the beginning, when Burns was explaining the mission, it cuts to a flashback with Sam and Elena getting communication from Professor Candide, who's telling them that the array that he designed is going to be used as a weapon, and they're forcing him to work on it, and so he needs to be rescued. And so when Sam sees Candide, he, sort of flips out and tries to rescue him, but there's too much gunfire, and then a bigger problem comes out.
Ah, yes. This is sort of the first appearance of our big bad guy, Zaitsev, the leader of the Order of the Red Star, and he is great. But he is also inside what looks very much like Sam's suit, but it has wings.
It's got a jetpack, it's got wings, then you have a boss fight against the enemy, which is marked as Bogey. And this fight is actually not too bad. It's really intense. He has some high power attacks, but the thing that his suit can't do is slow down time. And this is definitely where they really want you to focus on that, because you have no other advantages against Zaitsev. So he has lock-on laser weapons, which if you keep on the move, they're not too bad. You can hide behind cover. There's times where he'll say aim carefully and throw a floating mine at you, and if you don't shoot it in time, it'll spread explosives everywhere. Then he has the high-power lasers, which I think this is an instant kill, or near death.
Yeah, it will definitely knock you into near-death mode, if not outright kill you, I think.
Once you lower his health enough, you get to do another QTE finisher.
Yeah, that one is scripted to happen no matter what.
It's classic Platinum punch the hell out of them QTE.
I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
I think I remember hearing that the thing Sam does, where he just, turbocharges his fist, I heard there's a reference to an anime, but I just cannot remember which one.
Could be quite a few.
Yeah.
That's the thing, like Fist of the North Star, where he punches people a million times.
Yeah, it might also just be a reference. The God Hand is also most likely.
Yeah.
That's why the hardest difficulty is called God Hard.
Yeah. It also just lives up to its name, though.
The first time I got the QT, I was actually trying to perform a melee attack on the boss. So I thought it was being reactive to what I was doing. So the next time you fight this guy, I tried to do so many melee attacks and it did not work out for me.
Oh god.
After you do enough damage, Zaitsev is just a little impressed. and flies off effortlessly with Candide in tow. Now Burns is pissed that Sam had a secret agenda to rescue the professor, which I thought was kind of weird because I don't see what the big deal is. It's 100% in line with your goals of stopping them.
Yeah, it is kind of one of those weird things where it doesn't make a lot of sense when you first hear it. But as you get later into the game, things start to click a bit more.
Yeah, it does ultimately make sense, but it's weird that Sam doesn't find this strange right now.
Yeah.
But even still, he's a dick about it, so they're just mad at each other.
Yeah, like Sam could very easily just take that as Burns arbitrarily being a dick for the umpteenth time.
And speaking of which, the boss had lock-on lasers, and you too can get those. There's a few guns in this arena, actually, you will have seen by now. Lock-on laser, the rocket launcher, and the LFE gun. The lock-on laser is great. I used it a whole bunch. It does exactly what it says. You point it at some targets, highlight a bunch, and press fire. It'll shoot the lasers up into the sky, and they'll come down on your enemies.
Pretty interesting weapon, but I never really managed to use it much.
I think I ended up holding on to that for the most part. At first it was one of the random guns I'd pick up in my third slot all the time, but eventually I just kept it because when there are a ton of enemies behind cover in the area, you can just paint them all with a laser fire and like hide again, and they'll all get taken out because it also does a lot of damage. It can kill a lot of enemies, a lot of basic enemies in one hit. It's almost useless against bosses and stronger enemies, but it's still pretty good. Then there's the rocket launcher, which is very straightforward. You just point, it'll build up a lock-on an enemy, and then you just fire and it'll track them. Does a lot of damage, not much ammo, so I didn't use it very much. I just picked it up when it was convenient.
I didn't particularly use it often. I just had better guns that I could use. Rocket launcher's nice and all, but it's also kind of boring.
I actually remember sticking with the rocket launcher for a surprisingly long time. Like, I upgraded that to a really weirdly ridiculous level, and I don't know why.
How good does it get?
I think every level up just increases the damage.
Well, that's not really the problem.
No. I think a lot of the upgrades also, the lock-on becomes much quicker. By level 10, it's near instantaneous, so that is actually really useful.
I mean, another high-level technique with a rocket launcher is to just switch to it in the middle of firing another gun, and they'll just instantly fire a rocket at whatever you're aiming at.
Yeah.
Which can help with damage output a lot. Like, I mean, we mentioned switching to the heavy machine gun from the assault rifle. This is even greater damage output. No messing with lock-ons or anything.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the LFE gun. Its use is not totally apparent, though if you pause the game you can look at descriptions of the weapons. The purpose of this gun is expressly for shooting at enemies through cover.
Yeah, because it just fires a big orb that goes through cover.
It does a fair amount of damage, but if you just want to shoot at enemies, like, literally every gun is better for plane firing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really only good for that purpose.
Yeah.
Which is pretty good, but like we mentioned, there are also a fair number of high-level techniques that just let you kind of get around cover. It is used in the speed run, so it is definitely more efficient than some of those methods. Then you get on a high-speed transport. This section is really impressive.
Yeah, I remember when I could actually get a chance to actually look around, it was breathtaking.
It is, it looks so good.
Most of the time I was just desperately trying not to die as I was getting shot at all sides by all of the other transports that are trying to take your transport out.
Yeah, for this sequence, you have a bunch of turrets on board, a bunch of enemy light transports fly at you, which will carry some guys that will drop onto the transport, and then also smaller enemies called viewhounds, which are aircraft, which you'll probably want to shoot down using the turrets. They're not that hardy. You can actually use your main weapons and save the turrets for the transports and just blow those up all at once. But most of the spectacle of this sequence is the colony. You see a whole bunch of urban areas and stuff, and it's really fleshed out. A lot more fleshed out than the sequence has to be, and those objects are not sort of facades in the distance. They're very present, and you're very close to them.
The actual design of the colony was something that they had a really big struggle with. Like, it was such a problem that their current engine, which was at that point the Bayonetta engine, it was very much struggling to actually figure out how to make it work. They eventually had to settle on modeling the entire colony.
Yeah.
Because of that, they had to rebuild the engine from the ground up just to be able to handle all of the different models. But that kind of actually helped me in the end, because Platinum has a very crash and build style, as they describe it, where if something isn't working, then they'll just throw out entire chunks of the level, some levels entirely gone. Just, if they don't like it, then they'll just strip it out and start anew.
I can see that would be very problematic, but I can also see why that might be good. You get less instances of, holy shit, they just gave up with this level, didn't they?
For a game that's like 6 hours.
Yeah, Vanquish is 5 to 6 hours.
Yeah. It's got a lot of detail put into it.
Mm-hmm.
There are some segments later on where maybe they could have done without it or done it differently.
Yeah.
But stuff like this, I think they made it all because they wanted to put it into a bigger game, but they ended up keeping it, and I think it ends up making the game look nice in a way that a game that was budgeted or like by design made to be this long wouldn't have looked like. This probably would have taken place in a lot more tunnels.
Yeah.
Naoki Katakai, who did the colony design for this, the specific details, said the visual look of the interior space and how it expands out has a very sci-fi vibe, as the next town or city could actually be above you. It is an impossible spectacle. And that is really sold here because above you actually changes during the sequence, since the transport sort of weaves around a circular track.
This is definitely the point where they realized that they had to actually hammer home just how much of the colony they had modeled already. So here, have this fast-moving section where you can see huge sections of the colony all around you.
Yeah, at one point this ducking and weaving around this circular track results in another transport following alongside you, and the Gorgi is one of the details they have in World is that their presence prevents remote hacking, which is how Elena's opening doors and things for your team. She warns you that they're building up speed to ram your transport, so you have to kill all the enemies on board before that happens so she can direct the transport away. And both times I did this sequence, I had like 2 seconds remaining. I've never actually lost it. Can you? Or is it like really based on how far along you are?
I'm almost certain you probably can fail it, but it does a good job of making it feel like you're constantly on the verge of just losing it, which I think is good. It builds a lot of tension.
Yeah, but at one point the transport derails and a bunch of enemies start swarming around you. Burns says, "Shoot if you see so much as a fucking Roomba," written in caps. Like, after the eBay thing, it's just weird that there's these brand name drops in the game. And yeah, you're surrounded at this point. It's hard to not get hit here. I think if you are trying to do this theoretical no-cover run, this is definitely a place where that's extremely difficult, because you can't really go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
There are a bunch of weapons on board the craft. You can kind of hide behind the weapon containers. Yeah, I don't see why you would just not use cover here. Once you defeat enough enemies, you get another QuickTime event where there's another transport coming up on you. So Sam asks Elena to remove the limiter on his suit, and Sam runs at super speed and jumps up on this transport. And before he throws the Gorgi piloting it out, he shouts, like, "Your last year's model?"
That scene is so ridiculous.
Yeah, he sounds really angry about it too. That's pretty good. I didn't actually notice him saying that my first time through, but when I replayed and watched some footage, yeah, he says that.
From what I remember, it's really weird because I don't think it's actually subtitled.
Nope.
It's just played like one of his lines that he says, like whenever you pick up a gun or something.
It's not what I was after, but it'll do.
My favorite line in the game.
I love that line, which is good because you just hear it constantly.
Then the transport starts moving again with Burns on board, and it appears to crash. It gets played up a little bit, but obviously, like, to a degree that you would be like, nah, he's not dead.
Mm-hmm.
Nope, they didn't make a big enough deal about it. And then you get to a sequence that's sort of like a turret sequence, where Elena hacks the transport turrets so that when you pull up your weapon sights, they'll shoot at whatever you're shooting at, but you can still take cover and move around, which I kind of like, actually, especially because the transport shots are so strong.
Yeah, that bit's really interesting, and it's also really interesting because that never comes up again.
Yeah, hacking light transport seems really useful.